The boardroom had gone silent. Pens hovered in midair. Contracts worth hundreds of millions were seconds away from being signed when a 17-year-old girl, wearing her mother's janitor's badge, stepped forward and said the words that froze an empire. "Excuse me, but this clause is a trap." The CEO's smile shattered. Executives whispered. Security reached for the doors. In that moment, the girl no one was supposed to notice uncovered a secret powerful men thought would stay buried forever. But before we dive into the full story, let me know. Where are you watching from, and what time is it? If you like this story, don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and comment on the story you're watching. Your support helps us bring you even more powerful stories, and trust me, you won't want to miss them, because what came next wasn't just about a contract. It was about survival, betrayal, and the fight for truth. They say the city never sleeps, but Midtown Manhattan at 3:00 a.m. is a different kind of silence. It's not peaceful, it's tense, like the buildings themselves are holding their breath. My name is Brielle Noma, and I wasn't supposed to be in that boardroom. That wasn't part of the plan. I was supposed to be wiping down the 36th floor glass panels while my mom vacuumed conference rugs that cost more than our monthly rent. I'd done this routine so many times, I could practically sleepwalk through it, but that night had a pulse. Something in the air felt wrong. Mom noticed it too. She glanced at me as she wrapped up the hallway near the executive elevator. "No jokes tonight, Bree," she said, pulling her scarf tighter around her neck even though we were inside. "We get in, we get out." I nodded and pushed my cart forward, but I wasn't really listening. My mind was still caught on what I saw near the printer station in the corner of the executive suite. It was a folder. Not just any folder. This one was thick, pristine, and stamped in red. Confidential Merge Co. Finalization. Now, don't get it twisted. I wasn't trying to snoop. I wasn't trying to be slick. I'd grown up in offices like these, not as someone who belonged, but as someone who passed through quietly. But I'd also grown up learning that quiet girls get stepped on, and girls like me, black, working class, second-generation immigrants, don't get second chances. So yeah, I peeked. The pages were dense with legal lingo, stuff most people would have skimmed over. But I'd always had this weird obsession with fine print. While other kids watched reality TV, I watched congressional hearings and read Reddit threads on corporate lawsuits. I'd helped my mom translate her own cleaning contract when the company tried to cut her hours without notice. And as I scanned this one, something didn't sit right. That clause. It was buried deep like a landmine in paragraph 12, subsection B. It wasn't flashy. It didn't scream danger. But it shifted all post-merger liability, meaning lawsuits, debt, even fraud investigations, onto Westridge Capital, onto my mom's company. The other firm, Halberd and Rowe. Clean, no responsibility, no fallback. It looked like a handshake on paper, but it was a dagger. "Brielle!" My mom hissed down the hallway. "Stop stalling!" I shut the folder, slid it back exactly how I found it, and rushed to finish the glass. But I couldn't unsee what I'd seen. My heart pounded in a way it never did, not even during our worst night shifts. At the elevator, I hesitated. I glanced back at the boardroom, dark, sleek, full of secrets, and felt something twist in my chest. "Don't look back," Mom said, already pressing the service level. "It ain't our business." She was right, but I still looked. By the time we stepped out into the early morning chill, the city was waking up. Delivery trucks honked, breakfast carts rolled in, and people in trench coats rushed by, too fast to notice anything beneath them. We waited for the crosstown bus, huddled against the wind. "You okay?" Mom asked, finally seeing the look on my face. I hesitated. There was a file left open upstairs. Her expression changed instantly, wary, sharp. "Brielle," she warned. It had some weird language in it. The kind that moves all the legal heat onto this company. She closed her eyes and exhaled. That's not your place, Bree. What if it gets them sued? What if it gets us fired? She snapped louder than she meant to. Then she softened. Look, I raised you to think, but this is not your fight, baby. You understand me. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to let it go. But I couldn't. Later that morning, after Mom crashed on the couch, I sat at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal going soggy and a million thoughts racing through my head. I Googled merger liability clauses. I ended up down a rabbit hole of lawsuits, bankruptcies, and whistleblower cases that all started with something small, something hidden, like a folder left by a printer. A week ago, I was worried about my NYU admissions essay. Now, I was thinking about how corporations erase entire communities with one signature. That afternoon, I got a text from Jordan, my childhood friend from the building. Jordan 4:15 p.m. Hey, you coming to the art walk tonight? I got us free passes. I stared at it. Normal life, normal choices. Me 4:17 p.m. Maybe I'm dealing with something weird, might call later. I didn't go. Instead, I stared at my laptop and reread the merger clause I'd rewritten from memory, word by word, over and over. That evening, something strange happened. Our apartment buzzer rang. No one ever visited us unannounced. Mom was still asleep. I answered. It was a courier. Delivery for B, Noma. He handed me a thick manila envelope with no return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper, printed in bold. If you saw IT, then you know. Be careful, they clean up quickly. My stomach flipped. I wasn't crazy. Someone else saw it too, and that meant one thing. I wasn't supposed to find that file. Let me be clear about something right off the bat. I'm not some genius. I didn't graduate at 13. I never took any fancy prep courses. I still get confused by tax forms and can't fold a fitted sheet to save my life. But I do pay attention. I had to. Growing up, my mom would leave HR paperwork and employee handbooks lying around the kitchen table while cooking rice and beans. I'd read them in between bites just because it gave me something to do. It was like a second language. Terms like at will, non-compete, and early termination clause became as familiar as my own name. While other kids were obsessed with cartoons and TikToks, I was watching documentaries like Dirty Money and the Panama Papers. I didn't know it then, but I was training myself for this moment. And that's probably why that clause on page 22 hit me like a gut punch. It didn't scream scandal, it whispered ruin. That morning, I skipped sleep and printed out what I could from memory. My hands were still a little shaky from the courier's envelope the night before. The message inside wasn't just eerie, it felt personal, like someone knew I'd seen something I shouldn't have. I sat at the tiny dining table, the fake wood peeling at the corners, and stared at the screen. The clause was subtle, too subtle. It didn't outright say Westridge takes all the blame. No, it dressed itself up in legal politeness. Assumption of responsibility for contingent liabilities resulting from the consolidation. It sounded harmless, professional, but I knew better. It was the kind of language that would bury a company 6 months after a deal closes, and no one would even realize who lit the match. Ma, I said, not taking my eyes off the screen. Do you remember if Westridge has any pending lawsuits or unresolved claims? From the couch, still groggy and wrapped in her oversized hoodie, Mom groaned. Girl, why would I know that? You've worked there for 14 years. Haven't you heard anything? She raised her head, eyes narrowing. Why are you asking me legal questions before breakfast? I hesitated, then said, I saw something in a merger document last night. It moves liability onto Westridge. The whole company could be on the hook. That got her attention. Mom sat up straighter. Brielle, what did I tell you about getting involved in corporate people's business? I didn't plan on it, I said, pulling my legs up onto the chair. But the file was left open and something about it just didn't feel right. She looked away for a second, chewing the inside of her cheek. Then came the words she always said when life got tricky. You play smart. You don't play loud. She meant well. My mom's from Sierra Leone. She knows what happens to people who speak out when they don't have power or money to protect them. But silence is what gets people stepped on. That afternoon, I headed downstairs to grab a bodega sandwich. I needed air and something salty. When I stepped outside, I ran into Mrs. Harlow, our downstairs neighbor. "Brielle, you look like you've seen a ghost," she said, holding her shopping bags out like a balance beam. "I think I saw something dangerous at my mom's job." Mrs. Harlow tilted her head. "Dangerous like rats in the break room, or dangerous like someone stealing the company's pension?" I hesitated. "Closer to the second one," I said. "But no one wants to hear it from a girl with cleaning gloves and a backpack." She let out a low whistle and shook her head. "Well, sugar, remember, sometimes the maid sees more in one night than the CEO sees in a year." I smiled, just a little, then nodded and headed back upstairs. Later that night, I called Jordan. He picked up on the second ring. "What's up, Bree?" he asked. "You kinda dipped last night." "I found something big." Jordan had known me since we were 6, back when we used to play freeze tag between the laundry rooms on our floor. He also knew I didn't exaggerate. I explained the claws, the courier, the silence in that boardroom. He was quiet for a beat, then said, "Okay, what are you gonna do with it?" That question stuck to me like gum under a chair because honestly, I didn't know yet. The next morning, I got my answer. I woke up to a new email in my inbox. No sender name, just a subject line. "You're not the first." Inside was a single sentence. "Search Valmont Logistics plus Halberd and Rowe plus merger default." Start there. My breath caught. I searched. What I found chilled me. Valmont Logistics was a freight company that merged with Halberd and Rowe 2 years ago. 6 months after the merger, they went bankrupt. Internal documents showed massive liability from unresolved environmental violations. Lawsuits piled up. Halberd and Rowe had walked away untouched, and the clause in their contract, almost word for word identical to the one I read. "Ma," I said that evening, sliding the printed articles onto the counter. "They've done this before, and it wrecked a whole company." She didn't say anything at first, just stared down at the paper. Then she said, "You're not gonna let this go, are you?" I shook my head slowly. "No, I can't." She leaned back against the kitchen cabinet. "Then you better be sure, Brielle, because when you tug at a thread this big, it pulls back." That night I lay in bed wide awake. The city buzzed outside my window, honking horns, muffled music, someone shouting across the street. Life went on. But in my bones, I felt it. This wasn't going to be just a mistake I found. This was a storm, and I had just stuck my hand in the middle of it. They say there are moments in life that divide you before and after. For me, it was 5 words. "Excuse me, but this clause is a trap." I hadn't planned on saying them. Honestly, I'd rehearsed maybe a dozen different openers in the mirror that morning. "Hi, I just wanted to ask. Sorry to interrupt, but..." Even I think there might be a mistake. But when I walked into that boardroom, when I saw them gathered like a royal court around a table polished to a mirror shine, champagne flutes in hand and photographers snapping candids from the corner, those words just tumbled out of me. Loud, clear, unapologetic. The moment froze, like time had been dunked in molasses. Morgan Callahan, the man whose name was etched on the front of the building in gold, had been mid-toast. His glass was raised, his lips curled in that media-trained, photo-op smile, and then it cracked, like a dropped wine glass that doesn't shatter right away but you know it's ruined. He lowered the glass. "Excuse me," he said. The room shifted. I could feel it. Like every molecule of oxygen got sucked into the floor. A man in a gray suit turned and whispered to someone. A tall blonde in heels clicked toward the security guard standing by the double doors. The PR assistant's hand hovered near her iPad like it was a panic button. And then came the murmurs. "Who is she? Isn't that the janitor's kid? Who let her up here?" I was wearing my mom's old Westridge maintenance badge, flipped backward, and my Converse were still scuffed from that broken subway escalator. I didn't look like I belonged, but I stood there anyway. Morgan's gaze sharpened, eyes scanning me like I was a puzzle missing a few too many pieces. "I'm sorry, a trap," he asked, voice calm, but the kind of calm that meant he was 2 seconds from an explosion. I swallowed hard and stepped closer. My hands trembled behind my back, but my voice stayed firm. "Yes, the clause on page 22, paragraph 3, section B. It transfers post-merger liability onto Westridge. If anything goes wrong after the deal, lawsuits, tax fraud, default, your company takes the hit. Halberd and Rowe walks." There was a beat, then another, and then all at once the room was noise. "You're kidding me. This is insane. Someone call legal. Is this a prank?" One of the execs, a guy I later learned was Ken Morrill, head of acquisitions, stood up with a nervous smile and said, "Young lady, I think you may be confused." I stepped forward. "Check the contract, I'm not confused. You're about to sign a noose." And here's the weird part, Morgan didn't call security, not right away. He looked at his legal counsel, a sleek woman with sharp cheekbones and a colder stare. "Is it true?" he asked her. She hesitated, just for a second, but I caught it, and so did he. "Morgan, the clause was reviewed by legal. I'm not asking who reviewed it, I'm asking if it's true. I'd have to reread the document." "Then get it," he snapped. Her cheeks flushed as she turned on her heel. I heard a door click behind me and turned to see Jordan, wide-eyed, holding a messenger bag and a cold coffee. He mouthed, "What the hell are you doing?" I gave him a shrug. He had shown up because I'd texted him, "If I get arrested, bring bail." I guess I wasn't joking. Morgan finally walked around the table and stood directly in front of me. He was taller than I expected, with salt and pepper hair and a face that probably cost $10,000 a year in skincare products. "You're Brielle Noma, right?" he asked. I nodded. "Your mother is Maria Noma." "Yes." He looked past me for a moment, like he was connecting dots that didn't exist yet. Then he said something I'll never forget. "I've had this company vetted 6 ways from Sunday. Are you telling me we missed something that a 17-year-old cleaning assistant found in a hallway?" I didn't blink. "Yes, sir, that's exactly what I'm saying." The room exploded again. The PR rep whispered harshly into her headset. One of the investors actually laughed until Morgan shot him a look that could kill Frost. "Get me legal in here now," he said, storming back to the head of the table. Security stepped forward finally, like they'd just been rebooted. The blonde woman from earlier said, "Sir, should we escort her out?" Morgan looked at me for a long moment, then shook his head. "No, not yet." While they scrambled to pull up the digital contract, Jordan sidled up next to me, whispering, "You are out of your damn mind." "You think I made a mistake?" I whispered back. "I think you made about 5 mistakes, but also maybe one hell of a move." His eyes scanned the crowd. "You realize you just made enemies with half of Manhattan." I sighed. "I think I made them the second I was born in the wrong zip code." 10 minutes passed in a blur. Legal came in flustered and defensive. They tried to spin it, saying the clause was standard protective language. But when Morgan asked why it wasn't flagged in the executive summary, they didn't have an answer. He slammed the folder shut and said, "Nobody signs anything today. This meeting is over." Gasps, murmurs, chaos. I turned to leave, already feeling the tremor in my knees catching up to me. As I reached the door, Morgan called after me. "Brielle." I paused and turned back. He stared at me with something that looked a lot like curiosity, or maybe caution. "You better be sure you're right." I met his eyes. "I am." That night I didn't sleep. Mom wasn't home yet. I knew she was going to hear about what I'd done, probably before she even clocked out. I curled up in the chair by the window, clutching my laptop to my chest. Below, the city buzzed like nothing had happened. But something had. A domino had fallen. And I had no idea how many were lined up behind it. The fallout didn't creep in. It slammed the door open, barged into our lives, and made itself at home. By 9:00 a.m., the next day my mom's phone rang. I heard her voice from the bathroom, low, sharp, forced calm with that edge she only used when someone was talking down to her. When she got off the call, she didn't say anything. She just sat down at the kitchen table with the phone in one hand and her mug of coffee in the other, staring at both like she didn't know which one to throw. Westridge canceled the contract, she finally said, effective immediately. I blinked. What but why? They said it's a client satisfaction issue, she interrupted, air quoting the words like they tasted bad. Some rep from management said they were restructuring preferred vendors and our team had become a reputational liability. I felt my chest tighten. They're blacklisting us, I asked. She nodded slowly, which means our cleaning company just lost its biggest account. I sat down across from her, my stomach churning. This is my fault. No, she said too fast, then again slower. No, this is their fault. You told the truth. They didn't like how it sounded. But the truth, it wasn't paying bills. By Wednesday, our paychecks didn't hit. I checked my email. NYU's admissions portal showed my application had changed from under final review to awaiting committee reevaluation. Reevaluation. I knew what that meant. Somebody whispered in someone else's ear. And suddenly, my GPA and extracurriculars weren't enough anymore. Funny how fast a high school senior becomes a risk when she opens her mouth in a boardroom. Jordan came by that afternoon with 2 cups of bubble tea and a sleeve of Oreos tucked under his arm. Thought you might need some comfort carbs, he said, plopping down next to me on the couch. I nodded, eyes still locked on my laptop screen. I'd been trying to find similar merger clauses online, digging through legal blogs, SEC filings, anything that even remotely looked like what I saw at Westridge. You know you could just stop, he said gently. Let it go, get back to normal. I laughed, it came out hollow. What's normal now? Pretending I didn't see it, watching them sign away an entire company while I stand by with a mop. He looked away. I didn't say it's fair. I'm just worried they'll come after you harder. I closed my laptop. They already did. That night, while my mom picked up a last-minute shift at a smaller office downtown, I stayed in, wrapped in an oversized hoodie, scrolling through old legal databases in the back corner of the Harlem Public Library. They had a limited database of court records, nothing fancy, but it was enough. I searched for keywords. Halberd and Rowe, merger fallout, default liability transfer. A few scattered cases came up, mostly closed settlements, a few private arbitration results. But the details were murky, sealed, sanitized. I stayed until the library closed. And that's when I saw it. A burner email in my inbox, no subject, just a name at the bottom, JH. The message read, "You saw it too, didn't you?" I froze. I clicked on the sender details, no name, just a generic string of numbers from a Proton mail address. I reread the message 5 times. My heart thudded louder than the heating pipes knocking in the hallway. I typed back, "Yes, I think I did. Who are you?" No reply, not that night, but someone out there knew what I saw, and for the first time in days I didn't feel insane, just watched. The next morning, I found Mom in the kitchen packing a lunch she didn't want to make. "I'm heading out to interview for one of the backup gigs," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Over on 58th and 2nd. It's half the pay, no benefits, but they need someone nights." I stared at the peanut butter sandwich she was folding into foil. "I can get a job after school, maybe at a law firm." "No." Her voice was firm, but her eyes softened when she looked up. You need to focus on school and college. Don't let them take that from you, too. I didn't have the heart to tell her I thought they already had. By Friday, word had gotten around the building. Mrs. Harlow from downstairs gave me a bag of homemade banana bread and said, "The truth gets punished before it gets praised. You just keep going, baby." Mr. Louis, the mailman, leaned in and whispered, "You shook the right tree. Now watch for what falls out." Everyone had something to say, but no one had any answers. Saturday morning, my inbox pinged again. J.H. had replied. "I worked in compliance. Halberd and Rowe, 3 years ago. I tried to stop them. No one listened. Then they stopped returning my calls. I've got files. We need to talk. There was an attachment, encrypted, password protected." I messaged back, "Where did you get this?" The reply came instantly. "You're not the first to see it, but you might be the first to survive saying something." I stared at the screen, adrenaline pumping. Then I typed the only thing I could think of. "Okay, let's talk." Because I'd already lost my silence. I wasn't about to lose my voice, too. The name came through on Sunday morning in a second encrypted email. Juniper Hale. I recognized it almost instantly. Not from headlines. Juniper never made it that far. But from an old industry blog I'd bookmarked last year. A small footnote in a takedown piece about a rogue analyst who tried to flag unstable language in a merger contract and was let go for non-compliance. That was corporate speak for we didn't like that she told the truth. Juniper had worked at Halberd and Rowe's compliance division. Her email said she'd lasted almost 6 years until she didn't. We agreed to meet that night. She chose the Harlem Rose Cafe, a small dim-lit place known for its chai and zero tolerance for laptop loiterers. It wasn't crowded, and the jazz music from the corner speaker made it feel like the kind of place secrets belonged to. She sat in the back booth, half-shadowed, stirring her tea. Tall, honey-toned skin, tight curls tucked into a low bun. Late 30s, maybe early 40s. Everything about her said, "I've been through it and I'm still standing, but barely." When I walked up, she looked me over, then gave a short nod. "You're younger than I expected," she said. I slid into the booth across from her. "You're exactly what I imagined." She smiled for half a second, then got straight to it. "They've done it 3 times, not counting what they are doing to Westridge now. Same blueprint, different logos." Over the next hour, Juniper pulled out a flash drive, secured in a small Altoids tin like something out of a spy movie. She popped it into her iPad and turned it toward me. "What you're looking at," she said, tapping the screen, "is the shell structure of Camber Tech Holdings, the Fall Guy Company from 2021. As she swiped through pages of diagrams and financial flowcharts, my head spun. Wait, this is where they dump the liability," I asked. "Exactly," Juniper replied. "They set up subsidiaries to absorb risk. Think of them like decoys. The deal makes it look like a clean merger, but once things go south, they dissolve the shell and shift blame onto the surviving entity." I leaned in. "And Halberd and Rowe? They come out glowing, every single time." She showed me more. Encrypted expense reports showing offshore wire transfers to banks in the Cayman Islands. Audit memos marked confidential, where internal auditors raised red flags that were mysteriously overwritten later. Emails, some even signed by Halberd execs, casually referencing liability redirection like it was an inside joke. I was stunned. Not just by the breadth of the fraud, but by how normal they made it look on paper. "They make it boring," I whispered. Juniper raised an eyebrow. "Exactly, because boring doesn't raise eyebrows." That night after we parted ways and I walked the 3 blocks home, something didn't feel right. My block, usually loud and chaotic at night, music from open windows, kids skateboarding, someone frying something delicious, was too quiet. I got to our building's front door and saw it immediately. Our mailbox had been ripped open. papers scattered on the floor, a small, plain, white envelope sitting on top of them like it belonged there. My heart pounded as I bent down to pick it up. Inside was a single piece of paper. No greeting, no signature. Just 4 words typed in bold. Stay in your place. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch with the lights off, staring at the letter, rereading it as if a hidden meaning would jump out the 5th or 6th time. When Mom got home from her night shift, I didn't tell her right away. I just hugged her longer than usual and she noticed. "You okay?" she asked. "Just tired," I mumbled. She brushed my cheek gently. "You've always been strong, but strength doesn't mean you fight every battle." That was her way of saying, I know something's up, but I won't force it. I told Jordan the next morning while we were walking to the corner store. He stopped in his tracks. "Someone broke into your mailbox. That's not just creepy, that's criminal." I nodded. And they knew my name, my address. They knew I wasn't backing off. His jaw clenched. "Bree, this is next level. You gotta tell someone." "I am telling someone," I said. "You. I mean like the cops or a lawyer or the actual FBI. I didn't answer, because the truth was I wasn't sure if I trusted any of them either. Juniper and I kept digging. We created a shared folder with 2-factor encryption. Everything we found, we uploaded and labeled. Shell companies, matching contracts, blacklisted employees, offshore transactions, whistleblower reports buried under red tape. We even found a list of bribed external auditors, names, dates, and payment amounts. Each one tied back to someone in Halberd and Rowe's legal or finance division. We were building a case brick by brick. And the higher the wall got, the more I realized we were being watched. One evening, after grabbing takeout from a Dominican spot down the street, I saw a black SUV parked across from our building. Engine on, tinted windows. When I passed it, I felt eyes on me. 2 nights later, same car, different spot, still there, I told Juniper over the phone. "Congratulations," she said dryly. "You're officially a problem now." I swallowed hard. "Do they ever stop?" "No," she replied. "They just get quieter, smarter, and more dangerous." 3 days later, a note was slipped under our apartment door. No envelope this time. Just a torn piece of paper with one sentence. "People like you don't win." My mom found it first. She held it in her hands like it might catch fire. She didn't yell, didn't scold. She just looked at me with eyes that had already seen too much in this life. "Tell me the truth, Brielle," she said softly. "Are you in danger?" I hesitated, and then I told her everything. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just nodded slowly, then said, "Then you finish what you started, but you do it smart. You hear me? You don't get reckless. You don't go alone. You don't disappear like the others." I grabbed her hand. "I won't, I promise." But in my heart, I already knew. People were disappearing. Secrets were unearthing. And someone, somewhere, was getting nervous enough to start a war. I didn't expect Morgan Callahan to say yes to a meeting. Honestly, I expected to get ignored or maybe ghosted by some well-dressed assistant with a fake laugh and Mr. Callahan's schedule is full indefinitely. But I sent the email anyway. Short, blunt. "You didn't sign that clause, but someone close to you did. I can prove it." I attached a screenshot, just one. A single line from the internal audit trail Juniper and I had decrypted. Approval, E. Gaines timestamp, 03:12 p.m. IP address, Internal Westridge Legal Division. 3 hours later, I got a reply from a generic account. "Tuesday, 4:30, Madison Park, come alone." Madison Park wasn't far, but it might as well have been a different world. Moms pushing strollers, kids chasing pigeons, businessmen fake laughing into Bluetooth headsets, like the world hadn't been cracked open from underneath. He sat near the fountain in a gray wool coat, no security in sight. I recognized him immediately. Morgan Callahan wasn't the type you missed. Broad shoulders, jaw sharp enough to cut granite, and a head of silver-streaked hair that probably cost $300 a month to maintain. He looked like Wall Street royalty. When I approached, he didn't look up right away. Just said, "You've caused quite a stir, MS, Noma." "I didn't come here to stir anything," I said. "I came because your signature wasn't on the clause that almost buried your company." That got his attention. He looked at me, eyes narrowing slightly. "You're referring to the asset reallocation clause." I shook my head. "I'm referring to the liability trap buried in paragraph 8, hidden in plain language. You didn't catch it, but someone on your team did, and they let it through." He gave a short, disbelieving laugh. "You expect me to believe that my legal department planted language meant to sink my own company?" "I don't expect you to believe it," I replied. "I expect you to read this." I slid my phone across the table. On the screen was the full audit trail, scrubbed clean, time-stamped, and cross-referenced. It pointed to Emery Gaines, his head legal counsel. He stared at the screen longer than I expected. At first, his face didn't move. Then, almost imperceptibly, something in his eyes shifted. Not guilt, recognition, like he'd been suspicious for a long time, but needed someone else to confirm what his pride refused to say out loud. He handed the phone back. "You got this from internal files?" he asked. I didn't answer. He studied me. "You're what, 17? 18 in 4 weeks, I said. "You know, in my world, people don't get to walk into private boardrooms and accuse top executives of fraud." "Good thing I'm not from your world," I said. That made him smirk just a little. I don't know what I expected from Morgan. Anger, maybe. Denial, some big, defensive monologue about integrity and reputation. But he just sat there, quiet, hands clasped, like he was doing math in his head. Then he said, "What you're talking about, if it's true, it doesn't stop at Gaines." I nodded. "We've traced connections to Derek Halberd himself." He tilted his head. "Founder of Halberd and Rowe." I nodded again. "And guess what? Public property records show Emery Gaines owns a summer home in Nantucket, 3 doors down from Halberd's. They've played golf together, donated to the same PAC, attended the same charity events for 15 years. He exhaled slowly. "God." "Yeah," I said. "It's not just shady, it's personal." We sat in silence for a few seconds. Then he leaned back. "You realize what you're saying could destroy careers, reputations, maybe even this company." "I realize it already almost did," I replied. "You just didn't know it yet." He didn't argue. He just stared at the trees, the breeze rustling the last golden leaves from their branches. "Do you want to destroy me, MS, Noma?" he asked suddenly. I blinked. "No." "Then what do you want?" "To stop them from doing this to anyone else." He nodded slowly. "And what if they already are?" Later that evening, back in our apartment, Mom was folding laundry while the TV played reruns of Family Feud. She looked at me and said, "You okay?" I sat beside her on the couch. "I think the CEO knows he got played." She chuckled. "That man probably hasn't gotten played since the Clinton administration." I laughed too, but it faded fast. "I think he's been blind," I admitted. "And I think that scares him more than being wrong." Jordan texted around 10:30. "Jordan, wanna walk to the bodega? It's less scary when you've got backup." We walked in silence for a while. The city was humming around us like it always did when the air started to cool down for fall. "I saw the news," he finally said. "Westridge stock dipped today. People are starting to talk." "I know," I said. "It's starting." "Are you scared?" I shrugged. "Yeah, but not enough to stop." When we turned the corner near the laundromat, Jordan gently grabbed my arm. "What?" He nodded ahead, a sleek black car again, no plates we could see, same model as the one that had been parked near my building 2 nights ago. We crossed the street slowly. The window cracked just slightly as we passed. Then the car sped off. Jordan looked at me. "That's twice now." I swallowed hard. "They're watching." "Then we give them something worth watching," he said. The next day, Juniper called. Her voice was sharp, fast, like she'd been running even though she hadn't moved. "They froze my accounts," she said. "All of them, bank, credit cards, even my gym membership, said there was suspicious activity." "They're retaliating," I said. "Yeah, and we're getting close." I looked at the wall above my desk, now plastered with notes, printouts, and red thread like some detective board from a crime series. "We need help," I said. "Real help." She paused. "I might know someone, but he's old school. Doesn't take cases unless he believes in them." "Then let's make him believe." That evening, as I updated our timeline, I saw something new pop up in the shared folder. A file Juniper uploaded. Title, Gaines Halberd Emery Com. PDF. I opened it. Inside was a private internal memo dated 3 weeks before the Westridge merger proposal. Subject, prepare Clause 9B adjustments. Callahan will be distracted by PR gala. And at the bottom, a signature. E.G. I thought I had seen what corporate corruption looked like. Emails, shell companies, a fancy clause here, a shady signature there. But nothing, not even the files Juniper and I dug up, prepared me for how fast and how quietly everything can unravel when you're finally seen as a threat. Juniper vanished first. No warning, no call, no explanation. I texted, I called, I emailed, nothing. She'd been responsive every single day for 2 weeks. She even sent me a gif of a dancing baby the night before. Said it reminded her of the first time she filed a compliance report that made a CEO sweat. The next morning, silence. Her number was disconnected. I biked down to her building in Washington Heights, buzzed her apartment. A neighbor said she'd seen 2 men in black jackets come by the night before. And when she checked her mail that morning, Juniper's apartment door was cracked open, lights off. Inside, nothing but the furniture. It had been wiped clean, like she'd never existed. Later that day, I arrived at school only to be called to the main office before I even made it past the second period bell. The assistant principal, Mr. Creel, looked uncomfortable behind his desk, like he was more afraid of upsetting himself than upsetting me. "Brielle," he said, clearing his throat, "we've received a formal complaint regarding your conduct. Disruptive behavior in class, insubordination, harassment of another student." "What?" I blinked. "I haven't even spoken to anyone this week." He avoided my eyes. "Unfortunately, due to the nature of the complaint, we're placing you on a 3-day out-of-school suspension effective immediately." "That's insane," I snapped. "You know this is retaliation, right? Someone made this up to scare me." He stood up awkwardly. "You can file an appeal, but for now, please collect your things." And just like that, I was walked out of the school building like I was some criminal. When I got home, things only got worse. The super was standing in our hallway, arguing with a stern-looking woman in a city inspector's vest. She turned to me with a clipboard and said, "Apartment 3C, that's you." I nodded warily. "We had an anonymous report of improper storage and electrical hazards. Routine inspection. I watched as 2 men, city workers or maybe not, walked past me into our home without a warrant, without hesitation. They poked through the pantry, opened drawers. One even took a photo of our modem. I stood frozen in the doorway. They didn't find anything. Of course they didn't. But they stayed too long, left too slowly, and they looked too comfortable going through our lives. That night I finally broke. "I don't know if I can keep doing this," I whispered to my mom as we sat at the edge of her bed. She took my hand, her eyes soft but steady. "They want that," she said. "They want you scared. You're making them nervous, Brielle. That's how you know you're close." And then Morgan sent the photo. No caption, just an image. 4 people on a yacht, wine glasses in hand, all smiles beneath a golden sunset. In the center stood Emery Gaines, wearing a navy blazer. To his right, Derek Halberd in white slacks and a smirk that made my stomach twist. To Emery's left was a woman I didn't recognize at first. I zoomed in, then again, and again. Clara Everstone. A judge. The judge assigned to oversee the entire Westridge-Halberd merger case. My jaw dropped. This wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't incompetence. It was a setup. This wasn't just a shady contract. It was a coordinated coup. I stared at the image so long that my phone went dark from inactivity. I tapped it again, just to make sure it was still real. I finally texted Morgan. "Why now?" He replied a few seconds later. "Because I'm finally listening." Jordan came by that night with 2 boxes of Little Caesars and a pack of Gatorade. He didn't say anything at first, just handed me a slice and turned on a random episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. When the second commercial break hit, he finally spoke. "You okay?" I shook my head. "No, Juniper's gone. They raided our apartment. I got suspended. And the judge overseeing the merger case, she was literally sipping sangria with Halberd last fall." Jordan blinked. "Wait, the judge?" "Yep, Clara Everstone. Isn't she the one who used to do campaign commercials about integrity on the bench?" I snorted. "Apparently integrity makes a great yacht accessory." He leaned back and rubbed his temples. "Bree, this is huge, but it also sounds dangerous." "I know, so what now?" I looked him dead in the eye. "Now we find someone they can't buy." But that was easier said than done, because after the picture leaked, and yes, I sent it to 3 different anonymous accounts on legal Twitter, the pressure got heavier. We started getting blocked from forums. 3 contacts we reached out to suddenly went dark. Juniper's email account, deleted. Someone was wiping the board. The final straw came when my mom's work application at a cleaning company she'd applied to 3 weeks ago was withdrawn without explanation. Then another. Her resume was spotless, but suddenly she was no longer a good fit. She didn't cry, didn't rage, she just looked at me, then at her old Westridge name badge she'd kept in her wallet and said quietly, "They're not just coming for you anymore." That's when I realized this wasn't a personal risk. It was a family sentence. At 2 a.m., I got a new email from a burner account I hadn't seen before. Subject: "I know what Halberd buried in the Houston case. I have the files." There was no name, no greeting, just a link to a hidden drive and one line. "Don't trust anyone in that courthouse." We needed someone who didn't flinch. Someone who'd seen the worst and still had something left to fight with. That someone turned out to be Serena Lockhart. She didn't work out of a shiny office tower or wear pastel power suits like TV lawyers. Her office was a converted loft in Chinatown above a dumpling shop, and her coat, gray wool with a rip in the sleeve, looked like it had lived through 3 court battles and 1 hurricane. She didn't smile when Morgan introduced us. She didn't shake my hand either. She just looked me over, scanned the stack of files in my backpack, and said, "You got guts, kid. I hope you've got receipts, too." Serena used to be a prosecutor for the U.S. Attorney's Office until, in her words, politics got louder than proof. She switched to private corporate ethics enforcement, basically a mercenary for the truth when the law was too scared or too slow. She brewed her coffee strong, cursed like a detective in a cop show, and scribbled notes in red Sharpie across walls of whiteboards covered in names, arrows, and sticky notes. I watched her pace the room, murmuring to herself, connecting dots we hadn't even seen. Finally, she turned to us, me, Morgan, and Jordan, who insisted on tagging along for backup and snacks, and said, "If you're telling the truth, we're not just talking fraud here. We're talking RICO." My mouth went dry. Jordan blinked. "Like mob-level racketeering RICO?" "Exactly," Serena replied, slapping a file onto the table. "Patterned criminal enterprise, coordinated behavior across multiple entities, fraud, bribery, witness intimidation, financial laundering, check, 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 and check. If we can tie all of this to Halberd and Rowe, you've got the kind of case that ends careers or puts people in federal prison." Morgan leaned forward, his voice low. "How do we build that kind of case without ending up buried under it?" Serena's answer came fast. "We get everything. We document everything. We secure the data. And then we leak the evidence strategically, quietly, to people who can move before the system eats us alive." She called in favors. One of her old contacts from the Department of Justice, a woman named Natalie Cruz, agreed to a quiet preliminary look at the documents we had. But first, Serena wanted to use a safe house, somewhere off-grid to consolidate all the files. "We're not doing this on your personal laptop, Brielle," she said firmly. "Your IP address is probably tattooed on someone's dashboard by now." She wasn't wrong. That same morning when I tried to log into my backup email account, it had been locked. Password changed. Recovery options wiped. I hadn't told anyone about that account. Morgan agreed to fund a temporary office space, neutral territory. Serena set up encrypted drives, air-gapped systems, and a new burner laptop just for our project. We called the space the Gray Room. No internet, no noise, just concrete, fluorescent lights and truth. That night, after uploading every document Juniper and I had, Serena turned to me and said, "Don't blink, Brielle. They're going to start poking harder now. You've become the thorn." She was right. At 3:12 a.m., I woke to the sound of metal scraping. At first, I thought it was the radiator acting up. Old buildings love to groan at night. But then I heard it again, lower, more deliberate. A slow grind of something against our lock. I sat up in bed, heart pounding in my throat. Then I heard it, a click. I froze. The hallway light was still on. I grabbed my phone and whispered, "Mom, someone's at the door." She was already standing, silent, eyes wide but calm in that terrifying way mothers get when fear turns into fire. She grabbed the baseball bat we kept by the couch. I turned on my phone's camera and hit record. Then silence, no footsteps, no voices, just the sound of the lock turning again, backward this time. And then the door clicked shut. Whoever it was had a key or picked the one we had. The next morning, the super confirmed the lock hadn't been damaged. But when he opened the maintenance records, the electronic entry log had been wiped clean. Jordan came over with his uncle's portable door brace and helped me install it. "I swear," he muttered, drilling in screws, "if one more person tries to mess with your life, I'm gonna start swinging." "Join the line," I said, half laughing, half terrified. We told Serena. She didn't flinch. "They're feeling the pressure. They wouldn't come to your apartment unless they knew the files were real." She pulled out a burner phone, dialed a number, and said, "It's time. Tell Natalie we're initiating the drop." That night we prepared the evidence leak. Not to the press, not yet. To a vetted federal contact Serena trusted with her life. We encrypted the drive 6 ways, stored the original in a vault, and used a courier drop system. No names, no addresses, just a time and a location. It felt like a spy movie, but the stakes weren't fiction. The final twist came that evening. I received a private message on Signal from an unknown number. "If you share anything else, we'll unseal your mother's immigration review from 02." I didn't even know she'd had one. When I showed her the message, her face went pale. She sat down hard, the strength momentarily drained from her. "I thought that file was buried," she whispered. "What was it?" "I had a visa issue when we first moved here. Your father's paperwork was delayed. They flagged me as undocumented for 6 months until it got fixed." "Can they do anything now?" "No, but if they spin it, they can make us look like a threat." I clenched my fists. "They're going after you now." "They already have," she said softly, "but they are too late." I forwarded the message to Serena. She texted back 2 words, "Let's burn them." Westridge's annual gala was a black tie affair, like Gatsby meets Goldman Sachs with better lighting and worse intentions. Crystal chandeliers, champagne fountains, a red carpet out front long enough to make a Hollywood agent jealous. Everything about it screamed curated power, and it was supposed to be Morgan Callahan's victory lap. But this year, he changed the script. I didn't even know I'd be speaking until the night before. We were in the Gray Room with Serena and Jordan, finalizing the drive that went to Natalie Cruz. Serena had her usual cup of gas station coffee, and Jordan was drawing mustaches on printed photos of Emery Gaines because stress makes him annoying. Then Morgan walked in. He took off his coat, ran a hand through his hair, and said, "Tomorrow night, the gala, I want you to tell them." I blinked. "You want me to tell the entire Westridge elite that their golden merger is a poisoned chalice?" He nodded. "They'll hear it from you. It'll hit harder." Serena looked up from the folder she was annotating. "You're finally taking the gloves off, huh?" Morgan didn't smile. "No, I'm grabbing the flamethrower." No one knew I'd be there. Not the board, not the press, not even the internal events team. Morgan said I'd be listed as special guest speaker from Westridge Future Initiatives. Whatever that meant. When I walked into the ballroom at the Roosevelt Grand Hotel, dressed in a black jumpsuit borrowed from Serena's assistant, I felt like a grenade in a room full of silk. The music swelled, people air-kissed. Waiters offered oysters and truffle risotto on tiny ceramic spoons. I kept my head down and tried not to trip over the carpet. Morgan gave his opening speech, sharp, charming, and vague, the usual. Then came the turn. He cleared his throat and said, "Tonight, I'd like to give the floor to someone whose voice this company, and frankly, I should have heard a long time ago." He turned toward me. I stepped forward, my heels clicking louder than the jazz band behind me. Every face in that room turned. And in the front row, I spotted Clara Everstone, her wine glass frozen midair. I stood at the mic and breathed. You don't realize how hot stage lights are until you're under them. They don't just shine, they interrogate. "I wasn't invited here tonight," I began. Not at first, because people like me usually aren't. A few murmurs, eyebrows raised. "I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a shareholder. I'm the daughter of a janitor who used to clean the very offices some of you call home. I read your contract while wiping down the glass." The room went still. And then I pulled out the clause printed on simple paper, highlighted in orange. I read it aloud, slowly, clearly, and then I flipped to the final page. This clause didn't just transfer liability, it transferred blame. It's a copy-paste job that's appeared in at least 3 other mergers brokered by Halberd and Rowe. Every one of those companies collapsed. Executives were sued. Employees lost their pensions. Halberd walked away richer. Someone gasped, someone else whispered, "What the hell is this?" I continued. "I have evidence of offshore accounts, bribed auditors, and communications showing that this merger was never designed to be fair. It was designed to fail, but only for Westridge. This wasn't due diligence. It was sabotage." The ballroom froze. For the first time in my life, I watched a room full of people with power go completely silent. Morgan stood behind me, hands folded. He didn't move, didn't interrupt. I ended with this. "I've been followed, suspended from school, threatened, and almost silenced. But tonight I speak not because I want revenge, but because I believe justice only begins when silence ends." I stepped back, and it was dead quiet, until someone clapped. Then another and another. It wasn't thunderous applause, not at first, but it built, enough to shake Clara's glass, enough to make a few men in the corner check their phones and leave. By the time I walked off stage, my hands were shaking. Jordan met me at the back entrance, practically vibrating. "You just mic dropped on Manhattan." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Did I say too much?" "Bree," he said, handing me a granola bar, "you didn't say enough." The video hit Twitter within the hour. Someone from the catering team had filmed it on their phone. By 2 a.m., it had 84,000 views. By sunrise, it was on the front page of Reddit. #janitor clause was trending. So was my name, which was a problem, because no one was supposed to know my name. 3 days later, it hit the tabloids. One headline read, "High school girl behind $300M merger collapse. Who is she really?" Another, "Meet the Bronx teen who brought down Manhattan's elite." They posted photos from my school website, photos from my Instagram, even a picture of me as a toddler on my mom's Facebook. The internet didn't care that I was a minor, or a whistleblower, or scared out of my mind. They turned me into a symbol, which was flattering and terrifying. Then came the trolls. You're just mad your mom cleans floors. Hope Westridge sues your whole bloodline. Stay in your lane, girl. But I wasn't alone. Messages poured in from former Westridge employees, from lawyers who'd been fired for overstepping, from interns who had seen red flags and been told to shut up and file the papers. One email stood out. You're not wrong. I saw the same clause in 2018 and said nothing. I regret it every day. Keep going. AL. But then the threats came back. Someone left a voicemail at our apartment phone. No words, just the sound of heavy breathing and a muffled she should have kept quiet. I sent the audio to Serena. She didn't hesitate. We're done playing defense, she said. Now we go wide. What's that mean? I asked. It means we don't just expose this merger, she replied. We tear down the entire playbook. There's a certain kind of silence that only happens right before your life gets ripped apart. For me, it came the morning after the gala went viral. I woke up to 112 new DMs. Half of them were heart emojis and messages like you're a hero. The other half, threats. Watch your back. Hope your mom's ready for a funeral. Lying little janitor girl. My hand trembled as I scrolled. And yet, I still got up at 5 a.m., tied my mom's apron around my waist, and walked 3 blocks down to clean that same law firm. The one with the marble floors and espresso machines no one touched. Because rent doesn't pause for justice. While scrubbing conference room glass, my mom finally broke the silence. You can still walk away, Brielle, she said softly, not meeting my eyes. We could move, start fresh. I shook my head. They're already trying to erase me. If I stop now, they win. She exhaled slowly and wiped down a chair. You're 17. They think that makes you easy to destroy. There it was, the sentence that echoed in my chest like a warning bell. By noon, the smear campaign was in full swing. Talk Radio 94. 2 called me an attention-seeking dropout. Daily Buzz ran a headline. The Bronx teen whistleblower who might be faking it all. They dragged up my old debate team losses, even a C+ from sophomore math. Somehow, that was enough to discredit the entire mountain of evidence I'd handed to Serena, Morgan, and federal agents. It wasn't about truth. It was about character assassination. Because in their world, if you can't disprove the message, you destroy the messenger. Then something happened. People started coming forward. It began with a late-night knock on our apartment door. I opened it and found a man in his 50s, gray vest, calloused hands, holding a tattered briefcase. He gave a nervous smile. You're Brielle, right? Who's asking? Manny used to be a paralegal at Halberd and Rowe. My heart skipped. You worked with Emery. He nodded. For 7 years, I saw that video of yours, and well, you're not wrong, not even a little. I let him in. Mom made tea. Manny sat at our kitchen table for 3 hours. He told us how he flagged irregular billing language years ago and got reassigned to parking enforcement. They made it clear, he said. My job was to print, not to think. He pulled out a manila envelope, copies of red-lined drafts, metadata logs, and a file labeled Emergency Strategy, Implosion Protocols. It was like opening Pandora's box. The next day, an email came from an AOL address I didn't recognize. Subject line, I believe you. Body, name's Opal. I retired in 2019, but I have something you might want. We met at a coffee shop in Queens. She was short, sharp-witted, wore a lavender scarf, and smelled like peppermint gum. She handed me a thumb drive and said, This contains boardroom audio from the 2017 Wyndham Growth merger. Halberd used the same liability clause. I blinked. How do you have this? Opal smirked. I might have been in charge of refreshments, but I knew how to run a dictaphone. We played the files later that night. The voice of Derek Halberd boomed from the speaker. Once Westridge eats the debt, we let the blood spill where it may. They won't know what hit them. Serena nearly dropped her glass. Jordan muttered, Holy crap, this isn't a smoking gun, this is a burning building. But we weren't the only ones watching. Later that week, someone emailed Serena a deepfake video of me edited to look like I was taking bribes from a corporate lobbyist. It was fake, but good. A caption flashed, "You play dirty, we play dirtier." My stomach turned. "This is how they win," I whispered, "by turning the public against me before the trial even starts." Serena crossed her arms. "Then we go louder." We posted Opal's audio online, anonymized, time-stamped, and backed by 2 independent verifiers. It caught fire. The New York Times picked it up. ProPublica requested an interview. And suddenly, their narrative started to collapse under the weight of our truth. At school, some teachers treated me like a liability. Mr. Wexler in AP Gov refused to call my name for attendance. But others surprised me. MS. Levina, my literature teacher, left a sticky note in my locker. "Your voice is louder than you know. Keep using it." That weekend, a quiet moment came at our kitchen table. Mom sat beside me, folding laundry, and asked, "If you could go back to that night on the 36th floor, would you still read that contract?" I looked at her tired eyes, cracked hands, warmth in her voice, and said, "Yeah, Mom, I'd read it twice." But we weren't done yet, because Serena's latest email had only one line. "Bree, we found the bank accounts, but you're not going to like who they trace back to." And just like that, the next chapter wasn't about money. It was about betrayal. I never imagined I'd walk through the grand columns of the Southern District Courthouse wearing second-hand shoes and a backpack with a broken zipper. But here I was. It smelled like old wood and nerves. The air was cold, corporate cold, the kind that doesn't move even when you're sweating. I passed by men in $1,000 suits, women in red-bottomed heels, reporters whispering into tiny mics. Every pair of eyes glanced over me and dismissed me just as quickly. I was the 17-year-old girl who mopped their lobby floors. Now I was the girl who brought them here. The trial began with the usual theater, opening arguments, credentials, objections. Morgan Callahan's legal team looked like they'd been printed from a catalog, sharp jawlines, expensive pens, and smugness that dripped from every word. But Morgan himself, he looked worn. His tie was crooked. He wasn't hiding behind sunglasses or arrogance anymore. He sat still, like a man watching the wreckage of his own legacy. Serena testified first. She was ruthless, calm, deliberate, precise. She laid out timelines, showed wire transfers, read internal emails with the kind of deadpan delivery that made them feel even more sinister. Then came Morgan. He cleared his throat before speaking, looked the jury dead in the eye, and said, "I didn't write the clause, but I didn't stop it either. That makes me complicit." You could feel the courtroom shift. His voice cracked slightly on the word complicit, and for the first time I saw the difference between guilt and remorse. My turn came on a Wednesday morning. The bailiff called my name, Brielle Noma, to the stand. I stood up slowly, my knees surprisingly steady. Mom squeezed my hand once, just once. That was all I needed. I swore in, sat down, and adjusted the microphone. The lead prosecutor asked gently, "Brielle, can you tell the court how you first discovered the merger clause?" I took a breath. I was cleaning the Westridge offices. My mom and I work overnight shifts. That night there was a folder left near a printer, one page stuck out. He leaned in. And what did it say? Page 22. It redirected post-merger liabilities to Westridge, but protected Halberd and Rowe from fallout. It was subtle, too subtle for it to be a mistake. I paused. But I wasn't there to snoop. I couldn't unsee it. And cleaning floors doesn't mean I don't see the dirt. That line landed. I felt it. A few jurors blinked hard. The defense tried to rattle me. A man with slicked-back hair stood, arms folded. "Miss Noma, you were. How old when you discovered this clause?" 17. "And you expect this jury to believe that a high school student, without a law degree, without corporate training, understood legal liability better than seasoned executives?" I didn't blink. I didn't understand everything, but I understood wrong when I saw it. I was raised by a woman who reads HR policy before bedtime. I grew up watching my mom work 16-hour days and still make payroll for 3 employees. So yes, I knew enough to speak up. He scoffed. Sounds like a convenient story. I leaned forward slightly. If it were convenient, I wouldn't be here. I'd still be mopping your floor. The courtroom stayed quiet after that. No more eye rolls, no more underestimation. And when the prosecution played Opal's recording, the one where Derek Halberd laughed and said, "Let Westridge bleed," you could feel the energy crackle like an exposed wire. That was the final thread. The jury came back on the 4th day, guilty on all counts, conspiracy to commit fraud, wire fraud, obstruction of justice, racketeering. People gasped. One of the defense attorneys dropped his pen. The judge looked up over her glasses and nodded, like she'd been waiting a long time to say it. Sentencing to follow. Morgan turned to look at me as they read the verdict. His eyes weren't angry. They were tired and, somehow, grateful. He mouthed, "Thank you." I didn't nod back, but something inside me, something small and heavy and locked away, felt released, because I hadn't done it for revenge. I'd done it for truth. Afterward, Serena and I stood outside the courthouse steps as reporters swarmed like bees on soda. "Do you want to say something?" she asked, holding out a mic they'd shoved in her hand. I shook my head, then paused, turned around. Facing the crowd, I said, "I wasn't trying to be a hero. I just knew something wasn't right and I spoke up. I hope other people watching do the same when it's their turn." Then I walked off the steps and into the wind with my mom, her hand gripping mine a little tighter than usual. But that wasn't the end. That night, I found a handwritten letter under our door. No return address. No signature. Just 4 words. "He's not the only one." 6 months later, I stood in front of the same building where it all began. Westridge Capital. Only now, it didn't feel like a fortress anymore. It didn't feel like a place meant to keep people like me out. The old marble plaque, the one that used to read Westridge Capital, established 1972, was gone. In its place was a new one, sleek, warm-toned brass, letters etched deep. The Brielle Noma Initiative for Economic Justice and Oversight. I ran my fingers across the cool metal. It didn't feel real, but it was. Morgan Callahan had stepped down quietly just weeks after the verdict. No press tour, no memoir deal, no last interview on some primetime show. He just left. Some say it was shame, others say he was forced. But I think it was something else, relief. He told me in our last meeting, just before walking out of the boardroom for good. "You gave me a chance to make peace with the better version of myself. Most people never get that." That day, he handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a full-ride scholarship to Columbia, signed by the new board, along with an offer. A permanent seat on the Junior Advisory Council for Corporate Ethics. I read it 3 times before showing it to my mom. She looked at me with that quiet pride she never wore on her face, but always carried in her shoulders. She didn't cry. She just said, "Looks like they finally figured out who you are." The initiative wasn't just symbolic, it had teeth. A new ethics panel was formed, made up of community reps, former whistleblowers, and young advocates like me. We reviewed every incoming partnership, every clause. We ran workshops for high schoolers from underserved neighborhoods, teaching them how to read contracts before they signed anything in life. We held quarterly public forums. We made the fine print visible. But not everything changed overnight. Some days were hard. There were nights I'd wake up to old fear clinging to my ribs like frost. Sometimes I'd walk past someone in a suit and wonder if they'd seen the articles, the trial, the stories, and judged me before I opened my mouth. Some classmates called me that girl from the lawsuit. But one day in the library at Columbia, a freshman named Angelica came up to me. She looked nervous, clutching a stack of books. She said, "I want to be like you. My uncle lost his job in that merger, and you stood up. You didn't let it happen in silence." I didn't know what to say at first, so I smiled and offered to help her study for her econ midterm. Sometimes justice doesn't look like a gavel, it looks like paying it forward. Mom still cleans the law firm down the block. She insists on it, says the routine keeps her grounded. Every now and then on school breaks or late weekends, I go with her. Not because I have to, because I want to. Because even now, with my name on a brass plaque, my face on a few magazine covers, and invitations to speak on panels across the country, I need to remember something. Where you come from isn't what holds you back. It's what shows you where to rise. One evening, we were walking home after a late shift. Our jackets zipped tight against the fall wind, our hands full of leftover donuts from the office kitchen. She glanced at me and said, "You still gonna help me clean even when you're on the cover of Forbes someday?" I laughed. "Only if you let me mop. You always hog the fun stuff." She rolled her eyes. "Mopping's an art, you're still an amateur." We both laughed under the glow of the street lamp. Back home, I opened my laptop to find an email from a girl in Cleveland, another from a teacher in Detroit, one from a janitor in Florida. They'd read the story. They saw the video, they saw me, and more importantly, they saw themselves. Justice didn't end in a courtroom. It began the moment someone, anyone, realized their voice could echo farther than silence ever could. When I look back, what I see isn't just a courtroom or a contract. I see a choice. A moment where I could have stayed silent or I could have spoken and lived with the consequences. And maybe that's the lesson. Life isn't measured by the titles you earn, the money you make, or the doors people try to shut in your face. It's measured by the moments when you decide that silence costs more than truth. Because the truth is this: no matter where you come from, no matter how invisible you've been made to feel, you carry something the world cannot take from you, your voice. So I want to ask you, what's the one thing in your life right now that you know isn't right, but you've been afraid to speak up about? And what would happen if you finally did? Remember, justice doesn't always wear a robe, and power doesn't always sit at the top of the building. Sometimes, it begins with someone who's just tired of watching lies win. If this story makes you think, leave a comment and share what part hit you hardest. If you have a different perspective, I'd love to hear it. Drop your thoughts below. And if stories like this move you, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next one. Because trust me, the next story might just be the one you need to hear.